Morning everybody, I'm Helen, live from the SAA headquarters here in Newark, and today I'm going to show you how to draw out a basic mandala. Before we start on the actual structures, I'm going to just show you a little bit about what can be achieved with many hours of practice and many hours of patience. So let's just have a quick look. So this is a basic two-colour mandala, which is the sort of thing that I'm going to show to you today. Here we have another one that's a 5-point mandala drawn with biro, pencils and little bits of white gouache into it. This one's a little bit more complicated, where the depth of shading goes into showing you how you can bring one section of the mandala further forward and throw them back. So these ones take much longer to create. They take a lot more structure to perform than we're going to actually have time to show you how to do today. And they're all created on backgrounds. And the backgrounds can be created with loads and loads of different things like inks and brush-o, etc. But we're not going to go that far today. We're going to keep it nice and simple for you. Here's a different one based on a rose window. And the rose window, as you'll all know, comes from the stained glass, and they can be brought into mandala design. So actually mandala is basically from the Sanskrit for circle. It's an integrated structure based around a circular design, and that's where we're going to go with you today. So as I say, I'm going to keep it nice and simple for you so that you can see how the structure is, see how the basis is built, and then take it from there, take your own creativity and just see where it takes you. Okay, so the equipment for this sort of thing is really simple, really basic, and I'm just working on a heavyweight cartridge paper for you today. Okay, so what we basically need to do is to first of all find the centre of the page, roughly the centre. This paper's about 21 centimetres, so I'm going to make a small dot at 10.5 centimetres. At 21 centimetres, I know that roughly an 18 centimetre circle is going to fit nicely. So I'm going to set the compass at roughly 9 centimetres. Okay, I've made a little dot in the middle, and then that's going to be my point for coming back to for all the circles that we're going to draw. So, nice, even circle. Now, using the compass takes a little bit of practice, but you need to get used to the fact that you're holding it and swinging it around a sort of arc, but by using the point, okay? If you hold it with the legs, you're going to spread the legs wider so that they're going to make, it's going to wobble and they'll be all over the place, okay? So from that point, we need to know where we're going to put the concentric circles. So, starting from the outside, I'm going to put them at, I've got marked somewhere, 0.5 centimetre, 2, lost my list. 2.5, 4.5, we'll go for 1 at 8, and we'll go for 1 at 6.5. Okay. So when you've got these marks marked out, you then need to adjust the compass so that you can put a circle, a concentric circle, inside each one. You really need to make sure that your dot stays in the same place, otherwise your circles just won't be inside. Okay. So lining up with the dots that you've made, swing the compass in an easy arc. Okay. Move it in a little bit, line up with the other dot that you made. Swing that in and do the same on all of them. Okay, nice and simple. The more you use a compass, the easier it gets. It kind of takes you back to school days. The only tricky one is that inner one. Okay, so you end up with a set of concentric circles like that. You need your protractor. It's not essential to have a full circle protractor, but it helps. Okay, so I'm just going to mark myself a line through the centre. I'll use a set square just to make sure that this line is nice and straight. Again, this doesn't matter if that's not particularly straight. It just sometimes makes life easier. Okay? So for a 6-point mandala, which is what we're going to do today, we need 24 sections. We need enough sections to be able to work side petals and intricacies of the pattern. If you only had the 6 points, everything will wander off as you're working it. Okay, so for the 6-point mandala, we're going to put a mark on the protractor at every 15 degrees. Okay, maths are not my strong point, so I tend to go round in threes and then go back round again. So we're marking at 30, 60, 90, 120, etc. Okay.
Just mind your head, Helen.
Sorry.
Okay.
Put me off maths.
Sorry.
Let's say I've got one at 80 instead of 90. We'll just rub that one out so it's not...
I take full responsibility.
Okay. Right, so they will quickly mark at the halfway point between all those. These, they're not crucial, but if they're not awfully accurate, you'll find that your mandala is tipping off to one side or another. So if you do spend a little bit of time just getting these marks in the right place, then it will help you, okay? So what you do then, because you've got 3 marks, actually, to be technical for the mathematicians along you don't physically need these because you only need two marks to make a circle, okay? It just adds to the accuracy. Put your pencil on the centre, line up your dots, and then just lightly mark through. Now I'm using a 2H mechanical pencil, because that does, A, it gives you nice sharp lines, B, it doesn't give you fat pencil lines that are difficult to rub out later. Okay. So just marking your way through the centre of the circle, like so. All right. Just lining it all up. So that goes like that, and then to save me having to do all of those, we'll move that one out of the way. All right, it's a bit like Blue Peter. Sorry, Gary. So this is what that will look like when it's all marked up with your pencil lines. Okay, so this now is ready to put the basis of your pattern. Okay, so the pattern is structured such that you mark out the sections, you put patterns within the sections that hold the structure of the design, and then you elaborate on those sections in colour. If you're feeling brave and you're feeling confident, it's not essential to do this in pencil first, but I think generally speaking, when you're starting, you're not confident about how it's going to look, and it's easy to change your mind with a pencil, but there becomes a point when you don't want to be able to change your mind, and then you need to have the courage and the commitment to go into pen and just let it flow. The idea behind mandalas for me is that there is kind of meditative practice, that you don't want to be thinking too much about what you're actually going to create. It's about letting the thing develop. So we'll move on to that now, and we'll let the thing develop along within these sections. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basic sections that we're going to put first a flower structure and then patterns into. Okay. So ignoring the centre section for now, we're going to use this second ring, and we're going to put just half arc, swivel it round, move, and a half arc. Missing 2, arcing round, missing 2, arcing round. Now, you tend to, when you're doing this, you need to go with the flow of your hand. Okay, when you've done one all the way round, it's easier to then turn, and work your way back. Okay, you find that you have a natural flow with your hand, and that you have a natural arc. The arc for your arm is that, naturally. All right, coming towards yourself is an alien movement. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to be comfortable. You want to be flowing with the work. The more your hand flows, the more your work will flow. Okay, so having got that central section marked in, I now go into this second ring, and I'm going to go from the top of the, for the sake of a better word, petals that I've just created, up, okay, and out, and out again. So just keep rotating the paper, and just keep letting your hand flow. Okay, and then back, and back. So as you get into the lines, you get a rhythm going. So this one's only actually got 6 sections at the moment. By the time you get around to 24 sections, you're going to really get a rhythm going as you're going around the pattern. All right. So I'm going to put an inner petal in between these just to add interest. So they come out from the intersection, excuse me, they come out from the intersection and meet up at the next stage. Okay. So I'm going to take this just for variety, up and then back down. So up, turning the paper all the time. You don't need to worry when you do this. I should end that there. You don't need to worry, full stop. Okay. But a lot of people, when they start to do this, are conscious and they want an eraser near them all the time. They want to think that the lines are perfect. They want to think that all the arcs are perfect, that everything is mathematically accurate. It's not. It will appear that way, okay? It will look like it's accurate. It's not. You know, if Gary zoomed in really, really closely, you will see that they're not. But it doesn't matter, because what you're going to get at the end of it all, see, that's a nice wobbly line, you're going to get an effect, and it's the effect that you're going for. But more than that, it's for you, okay? This is about you. This is about what you get out of it, and it's not about what anyone else might think of the lines that you've drawn, or the patterns, or the colours, or anything. This, a lot of the time for me, this is what I do before I go out and do something else, okay? These calm you, these should be soothing, they should be relaxing. So if you make any mistakes, they don't matter, okay? So I'm going to take that from there. I'm going to go out next from the big points, still using just 2 dividers. Nice smooth arc. You need to be careful not to press on too hard with this. Okay, because if you do, it's going to be hard to rub out later. Okay, so you need to keep it. I'm pressing on slightly harder than I would normally, just so that it shows up on the camera. But you need to be able to not gouge into your paper. Okay. Right. All right, so that's 3 of the circles sorted. I'm going to change it just slightly for the next ring of inner petals and just put a bit of a kink into it. So we're going up. You can do this on any of them. I choose petal lines just because They're the simplest ones to do. You can use inverted lines, you can wobble them around, you can have them. They can go wherever you feel that you want them to go, okay? The S shape is quite a nice, soothing sort of shape to do. All right. Now, with the theory of repetition, it's that you actually, the more you do something, the better you get at it. So going around these things and repeating them time after time, your hand just kind of cottons onto the idea of what it is that you're asking it to do. Your brain, your eyes, all the functions, all your senses start to work together with this. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of what happens to me as I go around them. So I've got one more ring to rough out for you, and that goes from there, and I'm going to wobble my way back up to that one again. Okay, so I'm going to waver. Again, they'll all be relatively similar to each other, and I think that's kind of a good way to think about these. They don't have to actually be precise, but they're starting in the same place and they're ending up roughly in the same place. Okay. So that you're going back, down, and over, down, and over. Oops, down. You find if you don't focus on what you're doing, if you forget and you start thinking about making a cup of tea or anything like that, you'll go wrong, okay? So you need to be mindful when you're working on this sort of thing. It's great for keeping you focused, it's great for keeping you in the present moment, because the minute you start thinking about anything that you might have forgotten, that's when you go wrong, all right? So you do need to concentrate on what you're doing. I have one last little section that to me looks a little bit big for the design that I've got in mind for today. So I'm just going to neatly slip, oops, slip in the operative word there, another shape just into those sections.
Helen,
Yeah?
I have a question for you.
Okay, make it an easy one, it's the first one.
Do you often know where you're going to go when you start, or do you just sort of make it up as you go along?
I never know where I'm going to start, where I'm going to go. I might have a vague idea. The thing about these things is they tend to have a life of their own. So I might have the idea that I'm going to start off with a 5 or a 6 point star. Sometimes I'll get the markings wrong on the protractor so that I end up with a different amount of points to what I intended. But these evolve. I sometimes think I'm going to start with a intense, dense pattern, and then it ends up light and airy. Or I think I'm going to have spaces in them, as you'll see in the patterns, and then they all end up getting filled and filled and filled. It seems to come from inside more than with any other kind of art to do. So I may have a vague idea, but at some point the mandala itself seems to take over. Does that make sense? Yeah? So that's got the basic structure of what we need to have drawn out onto it. So I've actually managed to complete that one. So on that one, this is now ready for pen work, okay? Once you get into the structure of how to do these, you don't have to do that in pencil. But if you get it wrong, then you have to be prepared to be a little bit more flexible than you would necessarily be if you were doing it in pencil first. So that's why sometimes I like that bit of structure. It's something that calms me into it. As I've been working here, my brain and my hands and everything have calmed into what I've been doing. So now I'm going to come to put the pens on. I'm actually more relaxed and I can work with it. So even in a situation like this, when you've got the camera on you and you're actually really scared of what you're going to do or you're going to get it wrong, I'm finding now that I've done this, I'm much calmer and much more relaxed. So that doesn't only go for kind of working with the cameras, that goes for everything. You know, this sort of thing just calms. It's amazingly good for anxiety and nervousness and stress and all that sort of thing, which is really why I fell in love with them and why I do so many of them. So moving on from that, we'll then go, I'm using the Stabilo 0.88 fine liners today. They're really nice bright colours, but they give me a lovely fine point to be able to work into it with patterns, all right? So I'm just going to outline basically everything that we've done. I'm going to come back to that centre circle and do, in fact I'll start with purple, and I'll come back to that centre circle once my hands are cooperating fully with my brain, okay? So all you're going to do very quickly is to ink over what you've done. All right. I'm not covering it up, am I, Gary, while I'm doing this? Okay. Colour-wise, today I've picked pink and purple to work with. Colours are personal, okay? The colours that you choose, I tend to work with either contrasting colours that are going to create a real zingy contrast. So today I've chosen pink and purple. Or you can choose harmonising colours, colours that are very close to each other on the colour wheel, and they give a much more subtle effect. I just thought that today it would be a little bit more dramatic to work with the pink and the purple. So I'm going to work on these couple of purple sections first. It's about creating balance as you do this. It's about creating harmony between where you put the colours. But again, planning it tends to take away some of the spontaneity that you've got with it. Sometimes it's not easy to talk and draw curved lines and stay on the lines. I was never very good at staying in the lines in colouring books as a child. Okay, so we'll have the purple down, we'll fit a little pink section in between. You see, once you've done this in pencil, first, there's not actually that much thinking goes into this second section. At this point, you're just inking the lines. Putting them over like that. So I'll just do this bit very quickly. Let a pink one go in there. And don't worry if you slip off the lines. The lines are going to go. No one's going to know. When it gets to the end of this, nobody's going to know how many mistakes you made in it, how many things you did wrong, or how many things you intended that were in your head that actually didn't anywhere end up on the page. Okay, so nobody will know. Some of the lines, it's quite nice to thicken them, give them a double edge, like this. It tends to work as a separator, as a divider between the patterns. I do tend to get a little bit heavy with the patterns that I put in. I tend to take these things, as I would say, to the limit of the paper. Okay. So you can do this on any decent drawing paper, heavyweight paper. I tend to like to work on the heavier papers because it gives me an option. It gives me an option to add other medias to it. It gives me an option to add watercolours to it later if I want to. It gives me the option to flick paint over it. I can work, as you'll see later, with coloured pencils into the shading. You can add to these things. So if I was to, it would draw out perfectly well just on normal printer paper, but it limits my options as to where I can go with it later. And being able to use mixed media in these things, if it suddenly pops into your brain that you want to do something else to it, then great, you know, use a heavyweight paper and you can push it to its limits. If you've worked on a thin paper, you can't, you're limited as to what you do with it, okay? So I go around and double up on some of them. Some of them I actually put sort of a centre section in, and for that I'm going from the point into the curve like that. The best way, I suppose, to think about these is that they're containers. All these little shapes that you're drawing are containers for what comes next. Okay. You can either go from the centre out or the point in, depending on which way your hand feels like it flows best. Okay, so you're going round and round and round. Keep repeating, whichever way you start to do it. If it feels comfortable, keep going that way. If it feels alien to you and you don't like it, try it a different way. You might find that actually coming towards you is good for you. You might find you're left-handed and you flow more that way. Just because I do it this way, this is the way that my body and my hands work well together. Yours may not. Find your way. Find the way that fits in with what you're going to do. Okay, so I'm going to double up the edges on this one. Okay, so I'm trying to keep the shapes even and neat, but it doesn't matter if they're not. Okay. There we go. So that's that ring. I tend to work in the rings and let it grow as it comes out. So in that case we'll do a pink one to fit around there. Okay. How are we doing, Gary? We're all right?
Oh, yeah, all good. You happy?
Yeah, I'm breathing now, and breathing is always good when you draw, although you do find that you hold your breath. Some of these lines, some of the bigger lines, you do find that you will hold your breath while you're doing them, but it's not good to hold your breath all the time. Yeah.
No, that's never good.
It's not going to look good on camera, is it? Helen was here a minute ago, and I'm not quite sure where she is now. All right. I'm actually going to just work my way out to the centre of this fairly quickly, because before I move on to the next stage, I want to show you how we put the circles around the outside. So this just carries on, nice and gently. Don't be afraid of moving the paper around. It's easier to move the paper around than it is to move yourself around. You know, it works. It works great. It just moves around. So
Anita's going to watch this and she's going to be so cross with me because I always get her to tape her paper down so nothing moves.
No.
All the cameras are perfect. She's going to watch this and go, well,
Helen can move the paper. I'd be moving around though if the paper wasn't.
Well, that's true, yeah.
You know, so we'll just, we'll move fairly quickly around this one. Take that. And then, was that? That one's not got it on. Pink. Wow, I've missed a stage off. Okay. It's very difficult actually repeating a design that I've created before, because these are obviously usually just one-offs, and I go off into my own little world with them, and then they just, as I said previously, they evolve. So having to consciously recreate something that I've created before feels very strange to me. Okay, so when I've got that, you'll notice I did a very narrow last band around it, okay? That I tend to use for some kind of edging, and one of my favourite edgings are little pearls. I'll use little pearls or little hoop shapes. It doesn't matter, it's just that one of my favourites are pearls. So to actually go round this circle with small circles could seem quite daunting to you, because it's like, well, you start here, but have you got enough room by the time you get to the end? So what I tend to do, using the width of the border as a guide, I'll put them on all the key points. Okay, so I'll sit them into all the points like that. Now you can actually buy, you can cheat, you can buy gadgets that you can use to draw circles with. I'm way too impatient for that. And for me, they stop the flow, and I'm not that bothered if they're actually perfect circles. Because by the time I've gone over them and then coloured them in and shaded them and everything, or put patterns into them, you're not going to know whether they're perfect circles or not. So what I do is I'm using the guidelines of the cross points to slot circles into them all like that. And you'll see they're not perfect circles. They're not bad, but some have a pointy bit on them, some have a bit where I don't quite catch it. I'm trying to do really nice circles, but I'm also trying not to get really worried if they're not perfect. I think perfection's not what I'm aiming for here. It sets me too high a challenge. Okay, so I go round, so you've got that sort of thing. So you've got all the key circles in, and then I kind of look at the size of the circle and think, how many can I get in between that, if that makes sense? So from this, I know that for the size they are, I could probably get another 3 in there without either squashing them up too much. So 3 is quite nice because you can do a central one again, followed by another central one, and then expand the last central one so that they all touch. So just showing you that again. You've got a central one, make that one fit, and make that one fit. Okay. So then you've got central. There we go.
Right. That's what the side angle was invented for.
I suddenly become aware that I'm getting more and more involved with what I'm drawing. So, okay. So that we'll just carry on round and round and round. As I say, your circles may not be perfectly circular, and you may surprise yourself and fit them all in. Obviously, if you'd done a slightly narrower border here, those circles would be easier to draw than a this is a ½ centimetre border, and the smaller they are, the easier. As you'll see, I'm going to do some really small circles into this later, and they're really easy to draw. But I kind of quite like my edging to make an impact, so having a nice bold circular border like this, it works quite well with it. What time? Okay. So this central flower, I left it till now because my hands are not shaking and I can do it. So this central flower, you're going up, round and back in on yourself. Okay. Like that. So you're fitting it into all those tiny, tiny centres you've got. And you just let it flow as you're going round. So you've got 24 of these that fit in. Obviously, the more points you've got into the star, the more sections you could do. A bigger. I don't know, I've written down how many sections you've got into a bigger one. If you're doing, say, a 9-point star, you're dividing your come on, help me out with this, Gary. You're dividing 36 by 9, 4. Is it 4 9s in 36? Yeah. So you're going to have to do it on every 40 degrees as they go around, and then every 20 degrees, so that you've got more sections. The more sections you've got in them, the more intricate your patterns, okay? So you end up, you carry that round. I'm just going to switch to this one so that I don't have to take too long doing that. So you carry it round, do ink all your points till you get to this stage. This then gives you a nice structure to work your patterns in. You then don't need your pencil lines anymore, all right? They're going to hinder your progress. So make sure your ink's dry before you start this one. Don't immediately do it because some of these pens take a few minutes to for the ink to dry, and I've done it before and sort of erased all the lines with patterns going across the page with them. Okay, so get rid of your structure lines at this point. Sorry. Okay. This is why you don't want to press on too hard when you draw your original lines out. You don't want to press on too hard with it all because you're going to rub them all out later. Okay.
Helen,
yeah.
Anne, who's watching, says you make it look so simplified, but is that kind of just practice?
Yes and no. Yes, this is actually simplified, but this stage is simple. And I think that is one of the things about them, that everybody thinks that they are really, really complicated. They're not if you break them down into this structure. As long as you follow this structure, all of the ones that I showed you earlier on, in fact, it might make sense more now, if I just show you that one again. That one, now that you've seen how I've created this structure, that might help you understand where this one started to come from, yeah? So it is, I have had a lot of practice, and it is easier to draw this structure in once you've practiced, but it is really, really simple to do. And doesn't take hours of practice to get to this kind of level with them. This really is my beginner's stage at it. So we're going to go on now to put the patterns into the shapes that we've created. And the patterns that I use are either from architecture, they're from nature, they're from centangles, they're from all over the place, but I tend to use very, very simple geometric things. Because I use this as a meditative practice, I don't want to be thinking too hard about how I structure them. So I want to relax into what I do. So most of the time I'm using just simple repetitive lines or circles, okay? So starting from the inside out, I'm just going to repeat the line that's making this arch that I've got smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? I take exactly the same structure, I follow the shape round, and I bring the shape round. Each time this little shape is getting smaller and smaller, okay? So it's following the arch, coming back on the arch, up, moving in a little, down, moving in a little each time, so that shape just ends up with no space, okay? Round, 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 okay. So I'll fill each one with the same pattern. Now, this is when a lot of people get a little bit worried that they're doing it straight on in pen. Don't get tempted. Don't get tempted into doing it in pencil. If you do it wrong, it's just different, right? It's not wrong. It just means that you've got to adapt. And getting all philosophical on you, like I do occasionally, it's a bit like life. It's not going to go to plan. You can have a map, you can have an idea, you can think that you know what you're going to do, and things are going to change, things are going to go wrong. And that's what mandalas will do for you. Things will go wrong. Even though I think I know what I'm going to do with this, something could go wrong and I'll have to adapt it and change it. It's not wrong, it's just different. It may be not what I planned, but it's different, it's not wrong. A mistake, it's just an opportunity to do it a different way that you hadn't perhaps planned, all right? Don't get uptight and chuck it away. I've never thrown one away yet. I've always just changed it to make it fit, and then I would defy anyone to find where the mistakes are. So please, please, if you do it wrong, don't start again, just change it. Just think, how can I do this now? It's different to what I intended, okay? So I'm going to go on to, I'll fill in these little ones next. So,
sorry.
Go on.
We have a question from Chris who wants to know, so what's the main difference between this and Zentangle?
These are in circles. There is no, I started with Zentangle. And for some reason I saw a mandala that someone had done, and I saw a way to put the patterns that I use in Zentangle into the mandalas. And when I started doing them, I found Zentangle soothing, but I found the repetition of the patterns in mandalas even more soothing. So there is no real difference. I think I like the repetition that I get when I'm doing a mandala.
I'd say that was the main difference.
Yeah. With Zentangle, it tends to be a little bit more random, and you make it up a little bit more as you're going along. With this, once I've come up with an idea for one pattern, I simply repeat that into the others, and I can relax a little bit more. So this pattern would go all the way around. It's these little infills. Let me just do one without an infill to show you. So when you've got your pattern drawn into it like that, and like this. So that's what I would call an open pattern. And then what I do is I go around and close some of the areas in around it just by blocking it. And what this does is it gives a bit of weight to the design. It gives a little bit of substance to it. As you can see, when it's all open, like they are, it's kind of lighter, all right? And as I've already said, I do tend to do quite intense, quite heavy, solid designs, shall we say. The more pattern you put into them and the more infilling you do, the more intense the pattern becomes, okay? So I've created these spaces here, these three, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can add the illusion of form to these things as well. So by creating, they're very flat patterns, by creating curves into the pattern, we then start to add form to it. And for me, this is when it starts to get exciting, because when I'm drawing with a pencil, you start off with a flat piece of paper, and art and drawing particularly is about creating form on that flat piece of paper, so that they come off so everything comes off the page. And for me, that's when this starts to get exciting, so that I'm starting with a white flat piece of paper, and I'm ending up with a very colourful 3D design if I've achieved what I set out to achieve. So I'm starting to try and create shapes that will create form into it. So by giving these curved lines, I'm creating a rounded effect. If I did, I'll pencil a couple just to show you the difference. If I was to put flat lines on it, it creates a very different effect. That stays still flat on the page. These sort of start to make it arch off the page. Okay. I prefer form. I prefer to be creating the illusion of shape and form as I'm going along. Some parts I'll want flat so that they can stay down on a page and some points I'll shape. So where I've got those shapes, I then can infill with flat lines, like that, just following on. Really simple line. It's all really basic, simple lines. They're not measured out, they're not particularly accurate. You find that your eye gets used to doing this sort of thing, and that you, as you go through it, you just get naturally more precise at doing them.
Helen?
Yeah?
Another question from Anne.
Okay.
Who is asking whether you tend to do these all just in one sitting, or whether you go over a period of days.
I do them in sections. If I could, I would sit, but they take about from 5 hours upwards, I would say, to do the whole thing. It's quite intense concentration. So what I tend to do is I'll do them in stages, and it's okay for me to go away at each stage. So the stages, I think I'm doing it in 5 stages today. I like to at least get to this stage before I leave it, and then at this stage, and then I'll leave it. Then I'll come back, and I can happily come back and put the patterns in at another stage, and then I can do the shading at a different stage. But it is quite intense, it's quite concentrated. You have to focus for quite a long time, and you might not even know what you're going to do next. You might have drawn a blank when you get to the stage of having drawn these out. You might not be sure where you're going to go with it. So you might need to walk away from it, and then you'll be walking around doing something else, and suddenly you'll think, oh, that pattern, I know what'll fit, and you can come back to it. So a lot of it depends on how much time you've got available, and how much concentration you can take. I think an hour or two of intense concentration is perhaps enough for most people. So once I've got all those blanked in with the little diamond patterns, I found when I blanked them out, I thought, they're a little bit plain. So you can play around with what you put into these. You can just put little lines into them. You could actually, we'll improvise, you could put little hoops and make them into hoops. You don't have to do each one the same, you know, it's your picture. You could put hoops in one, lines in another. These can be as intricate or as simple as you want them to be, these patterns, these shapes, once you've drawn them. Again, they're containers for whatever you feel. Because I draw a lot of flowers, I actually base a lot of my designs that I put on them on flower centres and that sort of thing. So just, you find that as you're doing them, just listen to your little voice in your head that says, that's enough, don't go over the top, don't do this, don't do that. Ignore the one that says, oh God, I've done it wrong, or I shouldn't be doing this. Just ignore that one. But listen out for the, what I call your intuition, your little hints and tips that are coming through from your creative inner that says, oh, that might look nice if you did it this way or that way. Okay. Play with it. When I first started doing them, I tended to get all my ideas out of books because I wasn't confident about my own creativity in it. I wasn't confident that I could come up with a pattern that was as good as somebody had put in a book, till I realised that those people putting them in books were just me and another guys, well, not me, but just like me. And then I thought, that's fine, you know. So we carry on like that with the patterns. I do want to show you how we're doing for time, Karen. Another 10,
another 10
yeah.
minutes. So.
Okay, so I'm just going to show you one of these more complicated patterns because it's the one that will make it look like it's really difficult, and it's not. I never got up there. So we do the outer section like that. So it's 2 lines that go out like that. flower centre, like that. Okay, we can put little lines and dots into these, however you want to embellish them, like so. Then I just divide this into sections, like that. It looks really complicated when it's done on the design, but they are so simple. So you've divided it into sections like that. You just drop vertical down from it. Okay. Drop a vertical down like that, and then shade in, blocking around the edges like so. Okay. Sometimes if you do, just give yourself a little outline like that and then shade in. It makes it easier for you to fill in. Okay, so that's how that one was created. This inner circle comes round, circles, just letting them get smaller as they go in, and then guiding back to the centre point. Again, I'm doing this one. This one creates me like a 3D shape to work to, like so. Oops. All right, so you fill around that one. I'll show you this one again. Creating, how many did I do? 1, 2, 3. If I'm doing it in threes, I tend to like to spread them all out, one in the centre, and then it doesn't matter if the shape, the spaces are not quite even. So for this one, divided it into even arcs, like that, and then I just scoop back. Instead of taking, like that one was a straight line down, instead of taking a straight line down, I take an arc down like that, and an arc from the point down to the side like that. Okay, and then that's just a case of then filling in with concentric arcs that fit in like so. Okay, what else we've got in there? This one was an arch that went off, that just up, scooping down, the same type of pattern, the arcs in, like that. Okay, and then for this part, it was literally spiralling in on itself. Okay, with just the shading around it. So I think I've just got one more section that I've not shown you how to do. I think that one had, for this one, when you if you shade this one in, make sure that you shade the one next to it. I think I've done the wrong one. Should have said there, make sure you don't shade the one next to it. Okay. So I'm going to change that. I knew something would not be according to plan. So instead of, because I've actually shaded the one up to it, what I'm going to do, instead of colouring those side bits in, I will, on this one, colour the centre. Because I don't want it to merge, I don't want it to disappear into the pattern. So by doing that, now, that will create me a little bit more interest around them. Okay, so is that how, that's one section in all of them, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so what I want to do before we draw to a close, this is that final stage. As you can see, it takes quite a long time to get to that stage, and the patterns just need to evolve as you go around it. So once you get it to that stage, that would be all right to stop there. That could be finished. But for me, what comes next is like the icing on the cake. It's the decoration. And it's, for me, what I can get really involved in. And for a lot of people, it's what they say actually helps them with their or normal drawing, with their drawing where they're working on form and shape. So for this, I'm using my Derwent Pro colours because they melt into the page and they blend beautifully. But I pick colours that tone with the colours that I've actually worked with the pens. So I'm working with cerise and magenta today. Oh, this info was the only bit I didn't show on that. I'll just go rewind for 1 second. Because this looks complicated, but it's not. It is really just a case of doing little tiny circles to fill in the space, like that. I know why, because I've forgotten to put an arch on there, like that. So with this, you're just filling in. Try not to get them in a pattern. Try to do them randomly. It's okay to follow the outline around, but when you're filling in then, try not to do it in too much of a pattern, and you just literally fill it with tiny little circles like that. Sorry about that bit. Okay, so that's how this outer bit here is done. So to the coloured pencils, work with your pencils really sharp. They just help you get more accuracy in your shading, okay? And what we're trying to do with this is put the shading in places that are going to give you form, okay? So you're putting in drop shadows, essentially, and lifting other parts of the page. Now, this for me, as I say, is the icing on the cake. So this is the bit that I will take hours and hours happily sitting shading. This centre ball is picked off the page just by nudging up to it. And you just sort of shuffle up to it with your pencil. This is why you need to work with a sharp crayon. Okay, so you nudge into the shading. Nudge the shading into the flower, sorry. And then just soften. If you're doing this with normal drawing pencils, you can spend hours and hours and hours and hours doing this, and you can work with blenders and stumps and all sorts of stuff. But for this one, it's just an introduction for you to it, and it's nice to get the basics put in. Okay, so for these, to make these look 3D, just run a little bit of very light pencil up the edges. You don't have to do this with coloured pencil. You can do this just with ordinary pencil and it'll get the same shading effect. So if you've not got the coloured pencils, it doesn't matter. A lot of these mandalas, I just do them in biro, so that all the shading and everything is just done with a standard Bic biro. If that's all you've got when you're on a train, then that's all you've got. Okay. So you just stroke the shading into these shapes. And bit by bit, the form starts to grow from what you're doing. Okay. Bit behind. Putting things behind. If you want one thing to appear on top of another, you leave that light edge there, can you see there, and you put the shading behind it like that. Okay, so that throws things into the background, that throws things further back. If you want these to look like they're stacked one behind the other, then you can put a line of shading there. Okay, like that. If you want, once you come to do the pearls, decide which way up you want your picture, and then just start to shade them. A little bit of shading in the shadow, like that. Just in the dark. And so your shading builds up. Okay. Just keep pushing things back so that they disappear into it, so that you've got form with it. So that's a really, really very brief introduction into the shading. This is how I finished up with it. So you can see that these little pearls have been shaded into balls. This design here that I created, I've thrown it back into the background. The little tiny circles, they've all been thrown back too, so that that gives this appearance of a raised edge, and then those go back. I've shaded here and on these so that you've got form coming. I've shaded those, pushed them back a little bit. They wouldn't hurt if they went back even further. A little bit more shading. Take the light out of something, take the white paper away, take the light out of something, it goes back into it. Leave the light in it, leave the white paper, and it comes forwards. So I hope that makes sense to you. Does that look completed, Gary? Does that look, yes. That look as if it's okay with that?
Everybody online saying it's great, stunning, says Anne. Chris says, wow, the shading makes such a difference. Howard says it's so cool.
The shading makes a massive difference. Is there room for you to see them both side by side, Gary?
Yes.
So, if you can see them both side by side, I don't know if that can help. You need to get that in. Yeah. So this is why it's the icing on the cake for me. This is what makes it exciting. I love this. I love the patterns, but it's still flat. When you get to the shading, and it really, really is simple, then that really is what makes it for me to be as exciting as it is. And the fact that it evolves and it's relaxing and soothing. So have a go. Don't be scared. They're not difficult. They really, really are simple. And don't be frightened of making mistakes and growing with them. And I hope you've enjoyed the demonstration today. Thank you.
Before we go, a quick question.
Am I going?
Chris was just asking, how long did it take overall, the finished one?
About 5 hours.
Cool.
About 5 hours on that one. So,
you just put the finished one dead centre?
I can indeed.
There we go, we can finish on that shot.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.